I feel like he's got a Scorpio sun, Aquarius moon, Scorpio rising, Venus, and Mars. He's in hell. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to... I don't really know exactly what it is, but today we will be doing the first part in a really exciting series that I'm starting on my channel called Charting the Classics. I have been thinking about this for a while, and I just feel like it really combines my two loves, which are books and astrology. I have more than two loves, obviously, but I love books and I love astrology. The idea for this series is that I take characters from classic media and give them birth charts and explain to you why I chose the signs and placements that I chose. I want to do this series about all kinds of classics, classic movies, TV shows, books, whatever type of media I'm interested in. I want to be very clear, these are my opinions about what these characters' signs are. If you have other opinions, you have a really strong feeling about something, let me know in the comments down below, because I'm really open to having a conversation about this. I kind of dabbled into this in the shorts on my channel. I made a few shorts about the characters in Euphoria and what I thought their astrological placements are. So if you want to check that out, that will be linked down below and in the cards somewhere, if you can link shorts in the cards. But today we're going to be talking about the book Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I have a list of a few characters from the book, and then I also have exemplar quotes of theirs that I feel like really embody the placements that I've given them. I want to start with kind of the less interesting characters. I wanted to start with Mrs. Fairfax. I didn't do a whole chart for her just because I feel like we don't really have that much to like grip onto with her character in the novel, but I do really feel like she's a Capricorn. 18th century 19th century novels, like, but especially with like the 19th century English literature, so many people give Capricorn energy, but it's mostly just because of the mores of the Victorian time period. Like, it felt, a lot of them feel Capricorn-y, even though they might not necessarily be actual Capricorn. So like with a lot of these signs, with a lot of these characters, I really tried to look beyond that like general societal stuffiness and tap into who I really think they are. But Mrs. Fairfax, I think she's a Capricorn. She's a hater. This is not to drag Capricorns, of course. I really enjoy Capricorns, but they are the type of people who are willing to follow the rules and like stick with the rules. She very much in the book Jane Eyre is like, why the fuck are you making out with Mr. Rochester, Jane? And even when Jane explains that her and Mr. Rochester have gotten engaged, she's like, but you're a governess. You know he ain't never gonna marry you, right? This is just some ploy that he has to get you to give up your virtue. And then are you thinking this through, baby? The thing that I always come back to with Capricorn placements is that they understand the optics of a situation. They understand what's right and what's wrong, but they also understand how things look. And so Mrs. Fairfax is like, this don't look right. Like, you might love him, but this don't look right. She's very like, she doesn't have a maternal energy as much as she has a paternal energy with Jane, in my opinion. Especially thinking about Judi Dench's portrayal of her in the 2011 film with like Michael Fassbender and Mia Wasikowska. She's just so like protective of Jane in a very, it gives dad. It doesn't give like mom nurturing, I'm gonna like hold you to my bosom and comfort you that way. It gives like, here is some cut up fruit. Did I fix your emotional problems? That is what I have for Mrs. Fairfax. And then for Adele, I feel like she is probably a Aries sun, Leo moon, and then a Taurus rising, because to me she's just like very doll like in my mind. And I feel like Taurus risings are super like petite, and they have these like big cow eyes. It's not to say that they are cows or they look like cows. It's just like, you know how cows have these like big beautiful eyes. I would give her Aries because she has so much like energy. And I mean, she's a kid, yes, but even like some of the kids we encounter in these Victorian Edwardian novels are like Regency era novels are like they're not as vital as Adele is. Like, she's ready to party. She wants to meet the people who are coming to visit the house in Jane Eyre. She wants to put on her little performances. She enjoys being the center of attention. So I also gave her Leo Moon because that to me is the like being the center of attention part of her. Like an Aries sun, Leo moon, Taurus rising remains very youthful and childlike throughout their life. I think she'd like probably over the course of her life mellowed down a little bit, but was still like a fun gal. You know, she wasn't like scandalous, but was like ready to have fun. Then next I want to talk about St. John. I watched the 2011 Jane Eyre film before I read the novel. I read the novel for the first time in completion this year. But that movie raised me. The worms I have in my brain, that movie is directly responsible for all of them. And in that movie, St. John doesn't really play a huge part. He's played by Jamie Bell, who's like a super talented actor, but he's only in like maybe 20 minutes of a 2.5 hour or something like that long movie. So when I was watching it, I didn't really appreciate how much of a character he is. It just got, his whole like arc kind of felt random to me. But now that I've read the book, I understand a lot more, and there's so much more of St. John in the book than there is in that movie. If you are not familiar with Jane Eyre, you haven't read it in a long time, St. John is Jane's oh, and this is like some spoilers, so if you're going to read Jane Eyre like me, like I hadn't read it yet, these are spoilers. But St. John is Jane. I was rambling here for some reason. I don't know why I was so confused. He's literally Jane's cousin. He's her cousin on her dad's side that she didn't know existed. That's it. Then she like runs away from Thornfield Hall and just accidentally happens onto the front step of this kindly clergyman named St. John, and he takes her in, he takes care of her, he nurtures her, and at some point he decides that he's gonna marry her, not because he loves her, but because to him her disposition is the perfect disposition for a missionary's wife, and he wants to go on mission to India and forcibly convert a bunch of brown people to Christianity. He got very weird very quick, and that to me gives Scorpio everything energy. Like Scorpios, this, and none of this is a read. Like, I want to be very clear. I'm not dragging any sign that I mention in this video. I just am like, I'm observant and I'm a student of astrology. So like I know these things. I feel like he has a Scorpio sun, an Aquarius moon, because he's very remote from his emotions. He has a lot of like fixed sign energy, but not the fun fixed sign energy like Taurus and Leo, which sounds a bit like a read, but we'll get into that a little bit more. But like the very rigid fixed sign energy. So I feel like he's got a Scorpio sun, Aquarius moon, Scorpio rising, Venus, and Mars. He's in hell. I say this because Scorpios tend to have this reputation of being the like sexy people in the zodiac, mainly because they rule the genitals. Like each sign rules a different part of the body, and Scorpio rules the genitals and the reproductive organs. There is not enough acknowledgement of the ways that Scorpios deprive themselves because they struggle so much with the worldly realm. They struggle with worldliness. Everything about him seemed unsettling, but he was friendly in the beginning. So I feel like he could have I think I'm going to change him from a Scorpio rising to a Sag rising, because his housekeeper was immediately suspicious of Jane. And then he was like, come on, she's just a girl who's about to die in the cold. Like, let her in. So he gives off an appearance of being immediately friendly and welcoming, but then you see the like layers underneath all of that. And the other thing is that like Sagittarius are very much about seeking knowledge as a way to knowledge and experiences as a way to assuage existential angst. Sagittarius is try and run away from death. Sagittarius is the sign that comes after Scorpio. And so it's like kind of running away from the things that are Scorpio. And I feel like they try to have as many diverse experiences in life as they possibly can, so that when they die, inevitably they can say that they didn't regret anything. But then that leads to a situation where like they're constantly seeking and constantly going, and there's no destination in that kind of search. And so when they finally end up somewhere, staying somewhere for longer than 2 minutes, they're like, this is not fulfilling to me. That's a theme with Sinjin in this novel. He is very much he's a clergyman and he wants to go on mission and be a missionary, but he also is like so excited to die. Like I couldn't find the quotes, but like he is like okay with the idea that he will die one day and be reunited with God in the kingdom of heaven. So part of the reason that he fixates on Jane, and his fixation and obsession is what made me feel like he might be Scorpio in a lot of his other placements, is that he thinks her soul's mission is to be a missionary's wife and to aid him, essentially. He is imposing his idea of what spiritual fulfillment is onto her and not allowing her to have her own relationship with God. Scorpios, being the opposite sign of Taurus, Taurus is all about indulgence. It's about the five senses: touch, taste, smell, sound. I feel like I'm missing sight, all of those things. And Scorpio, on the flip side of that, can be a lot about, so we think of Scorpio as this very sensual sign because it rules the genitals, and we're always talking about Scorpio as the sign of sex and death. But what the flip side of that, the flip side of the sensuality coin is deprivation. Thinking that indulgence in the five senses will essentially doom your soul to hell, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So what we see with a lot of Scorpio Mars, a lot of Scorpio placements in general, is that sex can be something that is very contentious for them and confusing for them. Romantic emotions, Scorpios have this depth of emotion, this like, I think of their feelings as like a black hole, like a void. And there's a way that when they feel too much, they're afraid that they will lose themselves in those feelings, because they know how good it can, how nice it can be to have love and joy and happiness and eat good food and smell good smells. And they know like what the pinnacle of that is. And they also are very preoccupied with what it's like to lose that. Sinjin is very obsessed with like depriving himself as a way of getting closer to God and connecting to God, and thinking, and it's a Christian ideal of the time period, right? That's like this forced aestheticism is the way that you get closer to God. And you see that he is in love with a woman in his town, and he's been in love with her for a while, and she reciprocates his feelings, but his calling to be a missionary is more important to him than the feelings that he might have for this woman. So that is like a level of deprivation that he is forcing upon himself, because everybody's like, you can just marry her and not go and be a missionary or take her with you. I mean, like, he knows that she's not going to be happy being a missionary's wife, but so he makes the sacrifice of never requiting that love. And he never gets married, so he's probably spends his entire life as a virgin. That's in all likelihood if his morals match up with his actions. I see him with all of his Scorpio placements, and also with this Aquarius moon that I've assigned to him, intellectualizing his feelings to the point of deprivation. I gave him an Aquarius moon because I think Aquariuses can often get really sucked into dogma and okay, so this is editing Nada hopping in again. I feel like I was rambling here. I basically was trying to say, like, I feel like Aquariuses in general kind of feel like fish out of water on the earth. They feel like they're aliens trapped in this human experience, and so they want an instruction manual as to how to live humanity. That's why people always assign like this marches to the beat of their own drum, rebel kind of attitude to Aquarius, because Aquarius will try and do anything to get a life's purpose and fulfill it. That being said, St. has found his life's purpose to be being a clergyman and a missionary, and so he is going to go to the absolute extremes in fulfillment of that life's purpose. I think he's a Sagittarius rising too, because Sagittariuses can be very dogmatic when they believe in something and very putting their ideas of what is right and wrong onto other people if they have like a very strong belief. So yeah, I just wanted to clear that up because I feel like the way I explained it did not make any sense. Okay, so this is the quote that I feel like exemplifies all of St. Scorpio Aquarius, like very constipated energy. St. looks quiet, Jane, but he hides a fever in his vitals. You would think him gentle, yet in some things he is inexorable as death. Scorpios can be inexorable as death. To me is like scream Scorpio, but they're like so, like, you think a Taurus is stubborn? You think a Taurus is stubborn? No, baby. That's her talk. That's St. sister talking about his decision to go be a missionary or whatever. That is St. I gave him Scorpio Sun, Aquarius Moon, Sagittarius Rising, Scorpio Venus, and Mars. And then we have Miss Jane and Mr. Rochester. My toxic trait is that I'm a Mr. Rochester apologist. I know he kept a woman locked up in an attic for several years. He's my king. And I'm not sorry. For Mr. Rochester, I have Gemini Sun, Scorpio Moon, Scorpio Venus. I am giving Rochester and Aquarius Rising. I'm thinking about the rising sign as the core of who you are in traditional astrology, and also like how you face the world. And I think of like Willem Dafoe as an Aquarius Rising, someone who is not traditionally attractive, but there's something about him that's appealing. Like, you look at his face and it's like, what's going on there? Like, why can't I stop looking at you? Like, he's very, he's just like a weirdo, honestly. He's like aloof, but also charming, but also confusing, but also mean, but also very smart. Like, he's the pinnacle of two-facedness, which is the thing that Geminis always get called. And I don't think that it's necessarily that they're two-faced. I think it's just that they always have secrets. Like, I feel like Geminis always have secrets. And it's like, this, granted, his secret is a very serious secret, but like, it'll be stupid shit. It'll be like, I ate peanut butter directly out of the peanut butter jar every day when I was a child. Or it'll be like, I used to spit in the drinks of the customers that I didn't like while I was working. And they like want to tell people the secrets because they know that it's like mysterious and weird, but they also will like never do that because they'll never trust anybody. At the end of the day, they're just like, they always seem so much more normal than they are. There's just like a thin layer of film covering and underneath of just unhinged essence. And that is what Rochester gives me. I give him a Scorpio Moon and a Scorpio Venus because he's obsessed with Jane. Like I've said, I'm a Rochester apologist. This isn't to say that I think everything that he does and says makes sense, but one of my favorite quotes of all time, which exemplifies how unhealthy I am, from Jane Eyre, is from Rochester. And he says to Jane, I sometimes have a queer feeling with regard to you, especially when you are near me as now. It is as if I had a string somewhere under my left ribs, tightly and inextricably knotted to a similar string situated in the corresponding quarter of your little frame. And if that boisterous channel and the 200 miles or so of land come broad between us, I am afraid that cord of communion will be snapped. And then I have a nervous notion I should take to bleeding inwardly. As for you, you'd forget me. When I tell you, I have listened to Michael Fassbender give that speech maybe 10,000 times. And that to me screams Scorpio Venus. It's like, you are obsessed with this person. Like, you have done so much thinking and feeling about this situation. You're in love with this person and you didn't even give them barely an inkling that you had these feelings towards them. Not to mention, he had a woman locked in his attic. He had a woman locked in his attic. There was a woman that he was married to who he kept locked in his attic. But he also, like, in that relationship seemed to be open, at least in the beginning, to finding some way to love this person. And then the second that he got an inkling that she wasn't going to be like this person that he could project all of this like love and just basically she wasn't going to be a blank canvas that he could project onto. That's when he just completely checked out and was like, see you later, I'm not interested in this at all. Then he goes on a sex tour of Europe. That is what I have for Mr. Rochester. When you say the things that he's done out loud, they're terrible, but then like when you read the book, it's like, damn, a man. Finally, we have Jane Eyre. For Jane, I gave her Sagittarius Sun, and that might be controversial, but stay with me. Taurus Moon, Pisces Venus, and Scorpio Rising. Jane is scary looking. Like, in my mind, nobody ever really says this, but in my mind, she looks like a terrified. She just is like scary. She's the type of person who you'll be in a room with her and you both came in together and then you turn and she's standing there silently having not moved for 5 minutes and you're just you're like, I knew you were there, but something about you is just like ghostly.
Can I help you?
So that's why I think she might be a Scorpio rising. There's also, like, I have an affinity with her. Whenever I have an affinity with characters, and this is my own bias jumping out, so that's why I'm saying, like, talk to me in the comments if you disagree. But whenever I have an affinity with characters, I feel like I have similar placements to them. And her Scorpio rising really speaks to me in terms of her, like, ostracization in her early childhood, feeling very lonely and isolated in the family that is supposed to love and care for her. For Sag Sun, so the thing about Jane Eyre that really spoke to me throughout the entire book, I read somewhere that people see her as like an example of what it is to be a submissive Victorian woman, and I literally could not disagree anymore. Jane to me is so, everything she does with her own freedom in mind. She's not going to do anything that is going to limit her options and limit her ability to take care of herself. And so the quote that really exemplifies her Sag Sun to me is, I am no bird, no net. And this is when she's talking to Rochester after he's like trying to tell her that she is in love with this man and she has been in love with him basically since she first met him, but she's not. You see that too when she goes shopping with him before their wedding. He's trying to buy her all these jewels and get her these fancy dresses, and she's like, I don't need any of that. Like, I don't want to be indebted to you in that way. Everything that she does in this book, getting herself out from under the thumb of other people, because when she has to rely on other pain and loss in her life. So she asks the doctor if he could talk to her aunt about sending her to school in the beginning of the book, and then she's able to go to school. And once the like teachers at the school, they believe what her aunt has said about her over what she has do an independent investigation, and they basically find that everything that had been told to them is a lie. So she's no longer at the mercy, and she's able to establish as a very intelligent and hardworking student and get a job there where she can like earn her own money. And once that no longer is filling up her cup and making her feel fulfilled, she puts an ad in the newspaper to get a job at a different place, which is how she ends up at Thornfield Hall. And then when she's at Thornfield Hall and she falls in love with Rochester, and everybody knowing that she has this relationship out of wedlock, decides to run away and go strike her life out on her own. And even though this is the only person that she's ever loved in her life, she's like, I don't need to know romantic love because and then when St. John is trying to get her to, and he is like, you're supposed to be a missionary's wife, this is what your duty is on this earth, she's like, no, I know who I am. I'm not going to go with you to India as your wife, because that would mean she was beholden to him. She was only willing to go with him to India as a sister. So she, like, throughout the whole book, everything she does with her own freedom in mind, with the idea of maintaining her autonomy. I feel like she has a Taurus moon because she's very loyal to me. Like, she goes back to her aunt and basically tells her, like, if you had been nice to me even once, I would have loved you for the rest of. And so that's why our relationship. And she never forgets what her aunt has done to her. She never forgets these things that she's been through and the things that people have put her through. But she allows the experience to accumulate. I feel like she has a Pisces Venus because this is me speaking from experience. She's with the first man she's ever met. And basically, like, when their relationship falls, I am either going to keep trying or I'm going either one, really. Like, I'm fine with either. I've experienced that, and I know the laying on the ground and or like a Pisces. I feel like she has a Pisces Venus. That's all I have for my first episode of Charting the Classics. Thank you so much for watching this video. Like I've said several times, please let me know what your opinions on these characters' placements are. I would love to talk to you about it more in the comments down below. And thank you so much for watching this. Please stay tuned for the next video that is coming out in this Vlogmas series. Goodbye.